They say your life doesn't flash before your eyes when you die, but when you're betrayed. For me, it started with a phone call, a single cheerful sentence that told me my family had pronounced me dead, even though my heart was still beating. They buried me under the weight of their perfect lives, lives I paid for, in a house I built. But they made one mistake. They forgot that I was the one who held the shovel. My story is about digging my way out, and what happens when the secrets you bury refuse to stay dead. If you want to witness how a forgotten old woman dismantled an empire built on lies, make sure you follow, like, and share. And hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss a single second of the fallout. This isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. The phone rang with the chipper, electronic melody Liam had programmed into it for his calls, a tune meant to sound modern and upbeat but always struck me as hollow, like a jingle for a product no one actually needed. I let it ring 3 times, a small, pointless ritual of resistance, before pressing the green icon on the screen. My name is Mia. I am 78 years old, and my story, the real one, begins here.
Mom, how are you doing?
Liam's voice was too loud, too smooth. It was his CEO voice, the one he used for quarterly reports and placating shareholders. He never used it with me unless he was managing me. I'm fine, Liam, the same as I was yesterday. My voice was quiet in the vast, silent house. This house, in the leafy suburb of Havenwood, had once been filled with the scent of sawdust from my husband Richard's workshop and the sound of Liam's childhood laughter. Now, it was just a museum of a life I used to live, and I was the sole, dusty exhibit. Great to hear it, he said, the words tumbling out in a practiced rhythm. Listen, Emma and I were just finalizing the details for the Seabrook trip. It's all coming together. We got the reservation at Aperture, that new place with 2 Michelin stars. Had to pull a few strings for that one. And I booked that private chef, Jean-Pierre, for a couple of nights. The kids are so excited. Mason wants to get his surfing certificate this year, and Scarlett just wants to post TikToks on the beach. You know how it is. He laughed, a short, perfunctory sound. I said nothing. I pictured it all so clearly. The gleaming, minimalist kitchen of the beach house, a kitchen I designed, the sprawling deck overlooking the Atlantic, where Richard and I had watched 100 sunsets. Now it was just a backdrop for their carefully staged social media content. Emma, artfully disheveled in a $1,000 linen sundress. Liam, pointing at something out at sea with a look of profound, proprietary satisfaction. My grandchildren, beautiful strangers, broadcasting their gilded youth to the world. A life funded entirely by the money Richard and I had bled for, built from nothing but his skill and my nerve. Anyway, he continued, the cheerfulness in his voice tightening ever so slightly, a sign he was getting to the point. We were looking at the schedule, all the activities, the friends we're having over for that barbecue on the 4th. It's going to be a packed 2 weeks. A pause. I waited. I knew this script. I knew the subtle shift in tone that preceded the blow. Mom, he said. And there it was. The sympathy, the cloying, condescending pity of a surgeon about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. We were thinking, and this is just us worrying, you know how Emma is. Maybe this year the trip is a bit much for you. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A bit much for me. My house. My beach. My ocean. It's a lot of activity, Mom, he went on, his voice a soothing, treacherous balm. The sun can be draining, and with all the people coming and going, it's chaotic. We just want you to be comfortable, to be safe. You should stay home and rest. We'll call you every day, of course, FaceTime you from the beach. He said I was too old. He didn't use the word, but it echoed in every syllable. Too frail, too slow, a liability, an antique that might break if handled too much. I wasn't his mother, a person to be cherished and included. I was a problem to be solved, a relic to be managed, a logistical inconvenience in their seamless, Instagram-perfect life. I imagined the conversation between him and Emma, her, with her perfectly arched brows furrowed in feigned concern. Liam, darling, we have to be realistic. She can barely get up the stairs. What if she falls? It would ruin the entire vacation. And him, nodding sagely, feeling so responsible, so mature for making the tough decision. My silence stretched. I could hear him breathing on the other end, waiting for my quiet, dignified acceptance. He expected a sigh, a sad, "Yes, dear, you're probably right." He expected me to retreat gracefully into the shadows they had assigned me. "The money Richard and I built," I said, my voice low and flat, devoid of the emotion he was braced for. "The company we started in a garage, the risks we took. You seem to enjoy the fruits of all that activity, Liam." He was thrown. The script had been tossed out. "Mom, what? That has nothing to do with this. This is about your health, your well-being." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it about the inconvenience of having an old woman at your party?" "A reminder that your perfect world is built on something that came before you, something you didn't earn?" "That's completely unfair," he sputtered, the smooth CEO facade cracking. "Emma and I have worked hard to maintain—" "To maintain what?" I interrupted. "A lifestyle, a social calendar? You haven't worked a day in your life, Liam, not a real day. You've managed an inheritance, and you've done it very well, I'll grant you. But don't you ever, ever mistake yourself for the person who built the damn thing." In that moment, I felt it. Not just a crack, but a deep, structural fracture. The beautiful, pristine porcelain of our family, the image we presented to the world for decades, was shattering. And through the fissure, I saw the ugly, grasping reality underneath. The call ended a few moments later with his flustered, angry platitudes. "You're not being rational, Mom. You're tired." I hung up the phone, and the silence that rushed back in wasn't empty anymore. It was screaming. It shrieked of ingratitude, of erasure. I walked from the kitchen into the main living room, my hand trailing along the cool plaster wall. My feet were silent on the oak floorboards Richard had laid himself. I stopped in front of his armchair. It was worn leather, cracked and softened with age, the color of dried blood. Liam and Emma were always trying to get me to replace it. "It's so heavy, Mom. It throws off the whole room." Of course it did. It was real. It had weight. It didn't match their airy, minimalist aesthetic, their life of curated weightlessness. I sank into it, the leather sighing around me. The smell of him, faint traces of pipe tobacco, wood polish, and something that was just Richard, clung to the fabric. And in that chair, a cold, clarifying fury began to burn away the fog of grief and resignation that had clouded my mind for years. I hadn't felt a rage this clean, this pure, since Richard died. They saw me as a piece of fragile china, a liability to be packed away in a dusty attic. They had forgotten that I wasn't the china. I was the one who bought the damn antique shop. They thought I was frail, incompetent, a dottery old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. An assumption they had cultivated for years with their helpful suggestions, their gentle takeovers of my finances, their insistence on handling my stressful bookings and appointments. It had been a slow, insidious campaign, and I, lost in my own sorrow, had let it happen. I had let them shrink my world until all that was left was this house, this chair, and their pitying phone calls, no more. The anger was a jolt of electricity, snapping synapses back to life. My mind, which had felt slow and muddy for so long, was suddenly sharp. The plan didn't form slowly. It landed in my head fully formed, a perfect crystalline structure of rebellion. I pushed myself out of the chair, my movements stiff but certain. I walked to the study, the room where Richard and I had charted the course of our lives over late-night coffees and balance sheets. I sat at the mahogany desk and powered on my computer. The screen glowed to life, illuminating my face in the dim room. My fingers, gnarled with arthritis, found the keyboard. They moved with a speed and precision that would have shocked my son. He probably imagined I used one finger to peck out emails, if I used a computer at all. He had no idea I still read financial reports, tracked the markets, managed the core trust that fed his entire existence. It was a secret I had kept, a small pocket of competence they hadn't yet managed to colonize. I typed Seabrook Coastal Realty into the search bar. The website appeared instantly. It was a slick, modern interface, full of drone shots of windswept beaches and smiling blonde families. Their slogan was, "Curate your escape." I nearly laughed. I clicked the owner login button in the top right corner. My username, Mia Hale 78, was already saved. The password was Richard1965, the year we were married. Something they would never guess. They thought my life began and ended with them. The owner portal loaded, and there it was, laid out in stark, digital, black and white. Booking ID, 77B4, C29A. Guest name, Liam Hale. Dates, July 1st, July 15th. Status, confirmed. Paid in full. The beach house wasn't just used by them. It wasn't a family perk. It was a high-end vacation rental, listed on the open market for $20,000 a week during peak season. And every year, I took it off the market for them, forgoing a small fortune so they could make memories. My memories, in my house. But the booking was under my name, linked to my account, paid for from the trust I controlled. They didn't even have the login details. They had simply told me the dates, and I, in my passive slumber, had dutifully arranged it. My cursor hovered over the booking. A small red button pulsed next to it. Cancel booking. For a single fleeting second, I hesitated. A wave of guilt, the ingrained habit of a mother, washed over me. The kids, Mason and his surfing certificate, the social humiliation for Emma, the sheer explosive anger it would detonate in Liam. I would be destroying a tradition. I would be starting a war. For 40 years, I had been the peacemaker, the smoother of rough edges, the silent, supportive foundation of our family. This act would turn me into an earthquake. Then I pictured Liam's voice. "A bit much for you." I pictured Emma's perfectly manicured hands, scrolling through caterers on her phone. I saw their lives, so full of things, so empty of gratitude. They weren't just taking a vacation, they were consuming my life, my legacy, and politely asking me to step out of the room while they did it. The hesitation vanished, burned away by the cold fury. This wasn't about a vacation. This was about existence. It was about reminding them who held the deed, not just to the house, but to their entire world. A small, vicious smile, a twisting of muscles I hadn't used in years, touched my lips. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room, the word a puff of cold air. I moved the cursor. Click. A pop-up window appeared, a final checkpoint. "Are you sure you want to permanently cancel this booking? All associated services will be terminated. This action cannot be undone." Confirm cancellation? My finger was steady on the mouse. I thought of Emma's face when the email from the private chef arrived. "We regret to inform you that your services for the Hale event have been canceled." I thought of Liam, checking his calendar, seeing the 2-week block marked Seabrook suddenly go blank. The thought didn't fill me with glee, but with a grim, righteous satisfaction. It felt like balancing a scale that had been tipped for far too long. I clicked, confirm. An email notification pinged in my inbox almost immediately. The subject line was stark. Booking cancellation confirmation, ID 77B4 C29A. The deed was done. The first stone had been thrown. Now, all I had to do was wait for the ripples to become a tsunami. I leaned back in the old desk chair and watched the sun set outside my window, staining the sky the color of a fresh bruise. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang again in under 30 minutes. The chipper jingle was gone. It was just a raw, insistent shriek. I looked at the screen. "Liam." I let it ring 5, 6, 7 times. I wanted him to marinate in his fury. Finally, I answered, but said nothing. I just held the phone to my ear, a silent audience for the performance I knew was coming. "What did you do?" His voice was unrecognizable. The smooth, placating mask was gone, burned away. This was the raw, ugly snarl of a spoiled child whose favorite toy had just been smashed. There was no "hi, Mom," no preamble, just pure, undiluted rage. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Liam," I said, my voice as calm and cool as a river stone. "Don't play dumb with me," he shouted, and I could hear him pacing, his footsteps heavy and furious. "The booking, the Seabrook house, I just got an email. It's canceled. All of it. The chef, the surfing lessons, the whole goddamn thing. What the hell did you do?" Before I could answer, a second voice, high-pitched and sharp as shattered glass, cut in. "Emma." She must have snatched the phone or gotten on an extension. Mia, you have to fix this right now. Do you have any idea how much we stand to lose? The deposits, Mia, the caterer, the boat charter, they're all non-refundable. We've paid thousands. And the humiliation. I've already sent out the invitations for the 4th of July party. The Sinclairs are coming. The Martins. What am I supposed to tell them? That my senile mother-in-law had a fit and ruined everyone's summer? Senile. The word was a weapon, and she wielded it with vicious precision. They accused me of spite, of madness, of being a cruel, vindictive old woman who had finally lost her mind. I listened, letting their venom wash over me, a toxic tide. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I offered them only a vast, echoing silence. My silence was a mirror, and in it, they were forced to see the ugly truth of their own reflections. Are you even listening? Liam raged. Say something, damn it. Are you senile? Is that what this is? Did you forget you did it? Or are you just being a bitch because you didn't get your way? The crudeness of it was clarifying. This was who they were when the world wasn't watching. This was the gratitude they felt for the life I had given them. My silence became my shield and my sword. It unnerved them more than any argument could. It was a vacuum into which they poured all their ugliness, and it simply absorbed it, giving nothing back. Mom, this is serious, Liam said, his voice changing again, trying a new tactic. The angry child was replaced by the concerned, rational adult dealing with an irrational patient. This is not normal behavior. Canceling everything, costing us thousands of dollars, hurting your own grandchildren. People are going to talk. This kind of erratic financial decision. It's a sign of something, Mom. A sign that you're not well. And there it was. The first hint of the next move. The foundation being laid. It wasn't just about a ruined vacation. It was about control. My money, my assets, my life. They were framing my rebellion as incompetence, my act of self-preservation as a symptom of decline. The children are devastated, Emma wailed in the background. Mason was crying. You made your grandson cry, Mia. I doubted Mason had shed a single tear, but it was a good line. It was all a performance, a frantic, desperate attempt to force me back into my designated role. But the stage had been burned down. I was no longer an actor in their play. As they raged, a strange and profound weariness began to seep into my bones. It wasn't the simple tiredness of an old woman at the end of a long day. This was different. It was a heavy, creeping weakness, a cold fog rolling into my mind. My limbs felt weighted down, my thoughts slow and syrupy. I blamed it on the stress of the confrontation, the adrenaline crash after the righteous anger. I felt a sudden, desperate need to lie down. I'm tired, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. We can talk about this another time. Tired? We're not done, Liam started, but I pressed the red icon, cutting him off mid-rant. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat at the desk for a long time, the phone lying dark on the polished wood. The house felt immense, and I felt frighteningly small within it. The fatigue was overwhelming now, a physical presence. I felt a dull ache behind my eyes. I made my way slowly upstairs, my hand gripping the banister for support. Each step was an effort. I collapsed into my bed without changing out of my clothes, the room spinning slightly. The anger had receded, leaving behind this strange, debilitating exhaustion. Their words echoed in my head. Senile. Erratic. Not well. Was it possible? Was this weakness a sign that they were right? A seed of doubt, cold and terrifying, took root in the fog of my mind. Later that evening, long after the sun had set, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up the dark room. And it wasn't a call, but a text message from a number I knew by heart, Scarlett, Liam and Emma's eldest, my granddaughter. I fumbled for my reading glasses, my hands shaking slightly. The message was short. Grandma, are you okay? Dad is losing his mind. He's saying some crazy things. I'm sorry if they were awful to you. I hope you're okay. I read the words over and over. They were the only drop of kindness in the entire bitter storm. A part of me, The part that was still a grandmother wanted to cling to it, to believe it was genuine. A flicker of warmth in the cold. But then I looked closer. The message was perfectly worded, sympathetic but non-committal. It didn't take a side. It was the message of a skilled diplomat, not a concerned teenager. I thought of Scarlett, with her effortless grace and her phone always in her hand. She was the star of Emma's social media, the beautiful, talented daughter who was going to be a nurse, so compassionate, so caring. Was this message her own idea, or had Emma coached her? Send your grandmother a nice text, Scarlett. We need to keep her on side. Make her think someone cares. I held the phone in my hand, the screen's light illuminating the deep lines on my face. Was this genuine concern? Or was it just another move in the game, another part of the performance? A more subtle, more insidious manipulation. The fatigue was a lead blanket, making it impossible to think clearly. I didn't reply. I just turned the phone over, plunging the room back into darkness, and wondered if there was anyone left in my family who wasn't just acting a part. The doubt was a poison, and in the suffocating quiet of my big, empty house, I felt it beginning to spread. The silence in the house had become a presence, a weight in the air that settled on my shoulders like a shroud. It had been a week since the phone call, a week of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew it was coming.
Liam's fury wasn't the kind that dissipated. It was the kind that condensed, hardened, and sought a target. The quiet ended not with a bang, but with the soft slide of mail through the slot in the front door. I saw it from the kitchen, a single, thick rectangle of expensive cream-colored paper lying on the welcome mat. It looked official. It looked final. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper was heavy, textured, the kind of stationery that cost more per sheet than a loaf of bread. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize, a string of names etched in elegant, merciless engraving. My heart, which had been beating a slow, tired rhythm, began to thud against my ribs like a trapped bird. I carried it to the kitchen table, the same table where Richard and I had planned our lives, where Liam had once done his homework, where Emma had so recently sat, smiling her placid, empty smile. My thumb slipped under the flap. The paper inside was just as cold, just as unforgiving. The words were laid out in stark black typography, a language of statutes and petitions that felt alien in my sun-drenched kitchen. But I understood them. Oh, I understood them perfectly. Emergency petition for conservatorship. The phrase hung in the air, a cloud of poison gas. They were taking everything, not just the beach house, not just the money. They were taking my right to exist as a person. They were petitioning the court to declare me incompetent, a child in the eyes of the law, to be managed and controlled for my own good. I read on, my vision blurring and sharpening with each wave of nausea. They cited my erratic and financially irresponsible behavior, the cancellation of their vacation, one act of defiance, twisted into a symptom of madness. They listed my age-related cognitive decline, a phrase so clinical it was obscene. And then came the dagger, plunged right between my ribs. A sworn statement from Emma, 2 pages of meticulously documented lies. She claimed I'd been forgetting names, appointments, conversations for months. She described finding the stove left on, the front door unlocked, things that had never happened. She wrote of my increasing confusion and periods of deep paranoia, painting a picture of a frail, frightened woman lost in the fog of dementia, a woman who needed to be protected from herself. Protected by them. They wanted control of my assets, my medical decisions, my home, my life. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't done in anger, like Liam's shouted insults. This was cold. This was planned. This was the dispassionate efficiency of an executioner. This wasn't revenge for a canceled trip. This was a coup. They had been waiting for this, planning for this. My one act of self-preservation had simply given them the opening they needed. The fatigue I'd been battling for months washed over me in a tidal wave. It was a physical thing, a leaden weight that started in my bones and spread outward, making my limbs feel heavy and useless. My hands, still holding the documents, shook uncontrollably. The legal papers felt like a death sentence. Emma's claims were fabrications, every last one. I knew they were. But the weakness, the bone-deep exhaustion, that felt real. The fog in my brain that I'd been blaming on age, on grief, on loneliness. It felt real, too. It was a persistent, gnawing weariness that made their accusations feel terrifyingly plausible. What if I was forgetting things? What if I was slipping away without even realizing it? The letter was a weapon, and its primary function was to make me turn on myself. For a terrifying moment, it worked. The foundations of my own mind felt like they were turning to sand. This was no longer about a vacation. It was a war for my own sanity, and I was losing. The doorbell chimed a few days later, a sound so jarring in the oppressive quiet that I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Scarlett. She stood on the porch, her brow furrowed with a familiar, youthful concern that felt like the only genuine thing I'd experienced in weeks. She had a brightly wrapped gift in her hands. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice soft. "Can I come in?" I ushered her inside, away from the prying eyes of the neighborhood. She was a whirlwind of fresh energy in the stale air of my house. She'd just started nursing school, and she carried the earnest, life-or-death gravity of someone who had recently learned how to take blood pressure. She was obsessed with health tech, a world of apps and data points that was completely foreign to me. "This is for you," she said, pushing the gift into my hands. "An early birthday present." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a watch. It was sleek and modern, a band of soft gray silicone and a face of dark, polished glass. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. "It's a smartwatch," she explained, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. She took it from the box and began fastening it to my wrist. The band was cool against my skin. "It does everything. It monitors your heart rate, your blood oxygen levels, your sleep patterns. It tracks your steps, sends you reminders. It even has fall detection, so if you ever took a tumble, it would automatically alert me and emergency services." "It sounds very complicated," I said, my voice thin. "It's not, I promise. I've already set it all up on an app on my phone. You don't have to do anything but wear it. Please, Grandma. It would make me feel so much better, just so I know you're safe." I looked at her face, so full of love and worry, and I couldn't say no. I saw the gift for what it was, a kind gesture, an expression of genuine care. But I couldn't ignore the context. It was tinged with the family paranoia, the narrative that I was a fragile object in need of constant surveillance. Liam and Emma wanted to monitor my finances. Scarlett wanted to monitor my vital signs. It was all part of the same story, the story of Mia, the fading matriarch. But her intentions were pure, I knew that. So I smiled, a real smile for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Thank you, my dear. It's beautiful." I wore the watch. It felt strange on my wrist at first, a cold, smooth circle of technology on my wrinkled skin. But I forgot it was there soon enough. That night, after Scarlett had left, I sat with the legal papers spread out on the table again. The threat of them, the cold finality of what they were trying to do, forced my mind backward. It pushed past the recent fog, past the years of comfortable routine, and into the deep, dark soil of the past. If they wanted to take this house, they needed to understand what it was built on, and so did I. A memory surfaced, unbidden, an image, then a feeling. It was one I had actively suppressed for 40 years, buried under the foundations of this life I had built. Richard and I, we were so young, so hungry. Not for wealth, not then, just for a foothold, for a life that wasn't a constant struggle against the tide. We were in this very town, Havenwood, before it was a wealthy enclave, when it was just a quiet fishing village with potential. The memory sharpened. A rainy night. The sound of water drumming on the unfinished roof of this house, just a wooden frame at the time, smelling of fresh-cut lumber and damp earth. There was another man with us. His name was Oliver Vance. He was a business rival from the city, a man who had built his own small empire on the ruins of others. He was wealthy, ruthless, and he was about to destroy us. He had discovered a corner we had cut, a risk we had taken to secure the land for this house and the small business we were trying to start. He was going to expose us, ruin us, take everything. I could see his face, slick with rain in the dim lantern light, smug, triumphant. He held our future in the palm of his hand, and he was enjoying it. I remembered the look in Richard's eyes. Not fear, not anymore. It was something colder, harder. The look of a cornered animal. And I remembered the choice we made. A choice made in the half-built frame of this house, with the storm raging outside and the scent of pine and mud in the air. A choice that became our original sin, the dark, silent cornerstone of everything we would ever build. The legal threat from my son was an echo of that night. Another man trying to take my house, my future. And I was being forced to remember how we dealt with the first one. The fatigue didn't just linger. It became a malevolent entity, a permanent resident in my body. Each morning I would wake up feeling as if I hadn't slept at all, but had instead run a marathon through thick mud. A dull, persistent headache pulsed behind my eyes, a constant low-grade thrumming that made thinking feel like a physical effort. The world seemed muted, colors less vibrant, sounds muffled, as if I were living my life from behind a pane of thick, dirty glass. I moved through my days in a haze, the simplest tasks requiring monumental effort. The fog in my brain was no longer a metaphor. It was a smothering blanket. One evening, the phone rang, its shrill cry cutting through the thick silence. It was Scarlett. Her voice, usually so bright and measured, was tight, stretched thin, with an urgency that sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my exhausted system. "Grandma, are you sitting down?" "Scarlett, what is it?" "What's wrong?" I sank into the armchair by the phone, my knuckles white as I gripped the receiver. "I've been looking at the data from your watch. I have the app synced here, remember? I check it every day." She took a shaky breath. "Grandma, something is really wrong. I didn't want to scare you, but I've been watching it for 3 nights now, and the pattern is identical. It's undeniable." "The pattern of what?" "Scarlett, you're frightening me." "Your biometrics," she said, the nursing student in her taking over, her voice becoming clinical despite the panic underneath. "Every night at almost the same time, your blood oxygen levels start to drop. I'm not talking about a small dip. They're falling into the low 80s. That's clinical hypoxia, Grandma. It's dangerous. At the same time, your resting heart rate becomes erratic. It's showing signs of arrhythmia. It's a significant cardiovascular event, happening over and over while you sleep." I was silent, my mind struggling to process the words. Hypoxia, arrhythmia. These were terms for hospital wards, for critical patients. "But here's the thing," she continued, her voice dropping, becoming more pointed. "The most important part. I asked you what you do every evening, and you told me you read a little, and then you have a cup of tea before bed. The data is crystal clear. These episodes, they start every single night, approximately 1 hour after you told me you drink your tea. Every single night. During the day, your vitals are mostly stable. A little tired maybe, but nothing like this. It only happens at night, after the tea." My blood didn't just run cold. It felt like it turned to ice, freezing in my veins. Emma. The image flashed into my mind, so vivid it was as if she were standing right there in the room. Emma, with her serene smile and her soft, concerned voice. Emma, who had been visiting so much lately, always in the late afternoon, always under the guise of checking in on me. Emma, who always, without fail, insisted on making me her special, calming herbal tea before she left. "It's a special blend from a little shop I found," she would say, her voice a gentle coo. "It's all natural, chamomile, lavender, a few other things. It will help you rest, Mia. You look so tired." She would bring it to me in my favorite cup, steaming and fragrant. She would watch me take the first sip, her eyes full of counterfeit compassion. The legal petition. Her sworn statement, filled with lies about my confusion and frailty. The debilitating fatigue. The fog. It wasn't age. It wasn't grief. It was the tea. The thought was monstrous, a violation so profound it seemed to defy reality. Was it possible? Could my own daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandchildren, be poisoning me? Slowly, methodically, night after night, drugging me just enough to create the very symptoms she was describing to the court, to make her lies true, to make me so weak and confused that I couldn't fight back when they came to take everything. It was unthinkable. It was the plot of a lurid paperback thriller. But I looked down at the sleek gray watch on my wrist. Scarlett was right. The data didn't have an agenda. The data didn't have emotions. The data didn't lie. And it was telling me that my son and his wife weren't just trying to steal my money. They were trying to steal my mind, my body, my life, one cup of tea at a time. The house wasn't just quiet anymore. It was whispering their secret. The realization should have shattered me. For a moment, it almost did. The sheer, cold-blooded evil of it threatened to pull me under, to drown me in the very fog they had created. But then something else happened. The fear, the hurt, the profound sense of betrayal. It didn't break me. It was transmuted. In the cold, dark alchemy of my heart, it was forged into something hard and sharp and utterly pure. Rage. A rage so cold and so clear, it burned away the last vestiges of the fog in my mind. I was no longer a victim. I was a target, and targets fight back. That evening, I heard Emma's car pull into the driveway. The familiar charade began, the concerned questions, the feigned affection, and then, right on schedule, the offer. "Let me make you a nice cup of tea before I go, Mia. You look like you could use it." "That would be lovely, dear," I said, my voice steady. She bustled in the kitchen, and a few minutes later, she returned with my favorite porcelain cup, steam rising in a fragrant plume. She placed it on the coaster on my bedside table. "There you are. Drink it all up. It will do you a world of good." She gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze and left, closing my bedroom door softly behind her. I listened to her footsteps recede down the hall, the front door opening and closing, the sound of her car engine starting and fading into the distance. I looked at the cup. It was a weapon, disguised as a kindness. My hand was steady as I picked it up. I walked into my bathroom, and without a moment's hesitation, I poured the entire contents down the sink. I rinsed the cup, dried it, and placed it back on the coaster. Then I got into bed and feigned sleep. The first night was the hardest. My body, accustomed to the nightly dose of whatever sedative she was using, felt restless. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, my mind working, turning over the past 40 years, fitting the pieces together. The next morning, for the first time in months, the headache was gone. The fog was still there, but it felt thinner, less oppressive. I repeated the ritual the next night, and the next. Each time Emma visited with her poisonous offering of peace, I would thank her, wait for her to leave, and pour it down the drain. And with each passing day, I felt myself returning. The exhaustion began to recede. My thoughts became sharper, my focus clearer. It was like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into the light. My own body was the first piece of evidence, its recovery a silent testament to her guilt. With this newfound clarity, the memories I had been wrestling with no longer felt like fragmented whispers. They returned with the sharp, vivid detail of a photograph. That rainy night, Oliver Vance, his arrogant smirk, Richard's cold fury. Oliver Vance didn't just get scared off. He didn't just change his mind and leave town. He disappeared, utterly. A man of his wealth and influence vanished without a trace. There was a brief investigation, but it went nowhere. He had no close family. His enemies were legion. It was assumed he'd met with foul play on some other shady deal, or perhaps fled the country to escape his own debts. No one ever thought to look in Havenwood. No one ever thought to look here, because he never left. He was here. He was part of the house. And Richard, my Richard. Before the money, before he was a businessman, he was a carpenter, a master craftsman. His hands were calloused and strong, and he could make wood sing. He had built this house himself, from the foundation up, with a small crew he supervised personally. He always said the house held our secrets. I had thought it was a romantic notion. I was wrong. I remembered something else, a detail I hadn't thought of in decades. The fireplace. He spent weeks, months, on the mantelpiece in the living room. It was an astonishing piece of work, carved from a single massive piece of dark oak. Intricate patterns of leaves and vines twisted across its surface, a piece of art far too grand and ornate for the simple rustic home we claimed to be building. When I'd asked him why he was spending so much time on it, why it was so elaborate, He had smiled a strange, sad smile. He had run his hand over the polished wood. "It's my masterpiece," he'd said, his voice quiet. "My confession in wood." A confession. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. I stood up and walked into the living room, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. I stood before the fireplace, the heart of the home. It was magnificent, a testament to my late husband's artistry, but I wasn't seeing the art anymore. I was seeing the secret. I suddenly knew. With a certainty that chilled me to the bone, I knew. The proof of what we did 40 years ago, the leverage I needed, the key to my freedom, and the instrument of their destruction. It wasn't in a bank vault or a safety deposit box. It wasn't buried in the yard under some dying tree. It was hidden in plain sight. It was right here, inside the architect's confession, inside the heart of the home they were trying to steal. The Google search felt like a betrayal of my own generation. I typed "elder abuse lawyer near me" into the search bar, my fingers stiff and clumsy on the keyboard. The screen filled with faces. Polished men in navy suits standing in front of impressive mahogany desks, their firm names etched in gold lettering on the walls behind them. They promised aggressive representation, shareholder protection, corporate litigation. They were Liam's people. They were the kind of men who would help a son declare his mother incompetent to protect an inheritance. I kept scrolling, past the glossy ads and the 5-star reviews that felt too clean, too manufactured. Then I saw a different kind of photo. A woman leaning against a simple brick wall, not a desk. She wore a dark blazer, but no power suit. Her hair was pulled back, functional. Her eyes, even in the small photo, were sharp, intelligent, and held no trace of manufactured warmth. Harper Vance. The name was a jolt, a cold shock. No, not Vance. Harper Sterling. My mind was playing tricks, connecting dots that weren't there. Her firm was small, just her name. The tagline beneath it wasn't about winning or fighting. It said, dignity, autonomy, justice. I called the number. A voice, the same one I imagined from the photo, answered on the second ring, crisp, efficient. "Sterling Law." "I need to make an appointment with Ms. Sterling," I said, my own voice sounding thin, reedy. "Regarding?" I swallowed. "A family matter, a potential conservatorship." There was a pause on the other end. It wasn't a pause of disinterest, but of focus. "Can you be in my office at 4 o'clock this afternoon?" Harper Sterling's office was in a renovated warehouse district, all exposed brick and steel beams, a world away from the gleaming towers of corporate law. It smelled of old paper and freshly brewed coffee. She wasn't in her late 30s, as I'd guessed. She was probably closer to 50, with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of long hours and intense concentration, not laughter. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mrs. Miller," she said, gesturing to a plain chair opposite her uncluttered desk. "You said this was about a conservatorship." I pushed the thick envelope across the desk, the legal notice from Liam's lawyers. She picked it up, her fingers deft, and read. I watched her eyes, the only part of her that betrayed any reaction. They narrowed, just slightly, as she scanned the pages. She read every word, from the formal salutation to the boilerplate legal threats at the end. She didn't skim. When she was done, she placed the document perfectly square in the center of her desk. "They're petitioning for emergency guardianship," she stated, her voice a flat, factual declaration. "They're citing erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and age-related cognitive decline. They've attached a sworn statement from your daughter-in-law, Emma, detailing several recent incidents." She looked up at me, her gaze steady, analytical. "The canceled vacation rental is listed as Exhibit A." "He told me I was too old to come," I said, the words tasting like ash. "He said he was worried about my health. Then he and his wife got angry about their non-refundable deposits." Harper nodded slowly. "Of course they did. So you have a son, Liam, and a daughter-in-law, Emma. Grandchildren?" "2. A boy and a girl. Scarlett, the girl, she's older. She's in nursing school." "And who lives with you?" "No one. I live alone. In the house my husband and I built." "And your husband?" "Richard. He passed away 10 years ago." "And the family assets?" The house, the money Liam is so concerned about? It was our money, Richard's and mine. We built a business from nothing, a high-end construction and design firm. Liam runs it now. Or rather, he occupies the CEO's chair. The money, the trust, it's all in my name. The house is in my name. Which is why they need a conservatorship, Harper said, connecting the final piece. They can't touch the principle of the trust without your signature, but if you're legally deemed incompetent, a conservator, your loving son, Liam, no doubt, can. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me about the cognitive decline, Mrs. Miller. Are you forgetful, confused? My hands were trembling, so I clasped them in my lap. I have been more tired than I've ever been in my life, foggy, like my head is full of cotton. It's been getting worse these last few months. The admission felt shameful, like I was proving their case for them. When did it start? I thought back. It's hard to say. It was gradual, but it got much worse after Emma started visiting more often. Harper's expression didn't change, but I saw a new intensity in her eyes. Tell me about her visits. She started coming by 2-3 times a week, ostensibly to check on me. She'd bring groceries I didn't ask for, tidy things that were already clean. She always insisted on making me a cup of tea before she left, a special herbal blend she got from some boutique wellness shop, to help me relax and sleep. Harper was silent for a long moment. And did you drink it? Every time. I thought she was being kind. I felt a fool, a naive, trusting fool. Do you have any of this tea left? No. She always brought a fresh bag and took the old one with her. Said it lost its potency. I saw the flicker then. The first real spark of emotion in her face. It was cold, hard anger. Mrs. Miller, do you own a smartphone? No, I have an old flip phone. Anything else? A tablet? A fitness tracker? And then I remembered. My granddaughter, Scarlett. She gave me a watch a few weeks ago. A smartwatch. She was worried about me. She said it would track my heart rate, my sleep, my oxygen levels. She set it up to send the data to her phone so she could keep an eye on things. I pulled up my sleeve and showed her the sleek black band on my wrist. It felt alien against my wrinkled skin. Harper stood up. I need you to authorize your granddaughter to share that data with me. All of it, immediately. Her tone left no room for argument. I called Scarlett, my voice shaking as I explained, in vague terms, that I'd hired a lawyer and needed her help. Scarlett, bless her heart, didn't pepper me with questions. She just said, "Of course, Grandma. Whatever you need." I'm sending it now. A moment later, a file arrived in Harper's email. She turned her monitor so I could see it. Lines and graphs, a language I didn't understand. But Harper understood it perfectly. She pointed a steady finger at the screen. "Here," she said, her voice tight with fury. "This is last Tuesday night. Emma's Instagram shows she visited you at 7 p.m. with your calming tea. And here, at 8:37 p.m., your blood oxygen saturation begins to drop. Not just a little. It plummets to dangerous levels. Your heart rate becomes erratic. It's a classic hypoxic event. It lasts for almost 5 hours while you're asleep. And look, it happened 2 days before that, and 3 days before that. The pattern is identical. It only happens on the nights your daughter-in-law visits." She swiveled in her chair to face me, her eyes blazing. "Mrs. Miller, they are not just building a case for incompetence. They are actively and systematically making you ill to prove it. The fatigue, the brain fog, those are symptoms of chronic oxygen deprivation. They are poisoning you, slowly, carefully, in your own home. This isn't just a disgusting tactic. This is attempted murder, gift wrapped in a teacup." The air left my lungs. The sterile, quiet office seemed to tilt on its axis. Poison. The word was medieval, theatrical. It wasn't a word that belonged in my life, in my house. But looking at the cold, hard data on the screen, I knew it was true. The insidious fog in my brain wasn't age. It was Emma. Harper let the silence sit for a moment, letting the horrific reality sink in. Then she was all business. "First, you will not drink anything she gives you ever again. Not water, not juice, nothing. Second, we are not going to court, not yet. We are going to let them walk directly into a trap of their own making. She leaned back, a predator planning a hunt. We will arrange a family mediation. We'll frame it as a final attempt to reach a settlement and avoid a messy, public legal battle. You know they'll agree. The one thing people like your son and his wife fear more than losing money is public shame. We'll hold it at your house, your turf, your stage. What will we do? I whispered. Harper's mouth curved into a smile that was anything but kind. We will let them perform. We will let them deliver their well-rehearsed lines about your fragility and their loving concern. We will let them build their cage of lies around you. And then, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous pitch, you and I are going to burn it to the ground. I left her office as the sun was setting, painting the sky in angry shades of orange and red. I felt a terror so profound it was almost exhilarating. I had an ally, a weapon. But the mediation was in 2 days. And before the final performance, there was one more secret I had to unearth. A secret that had been waiting, silent and patient, in the heart of my home for 40 years. The night before the mediation was unnaturally still. The usual mournful cry of the foghorn was absent, and the sea was a sheet of black glass under a sliver of moon. The house was quiet, but it was a loud quiet, a waiting quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind in the eaves seemed to be speaking to me, reminding me. For 2 days, I had not touched Emma's tea. The fog in my head had begun to lift, slowly at first, then with a startling, painful clarity. Memories were returning, sharp-edged and vivid, and with the clarity came the memory of Richard's words, spoken late one night, years after the house was finished. A bottle of whiskey opened between us. He had been staring into the fire, his hand resting on the intricately carved mantelpiece. It's my confession, he'd murmured, so low I'd barely heard him. A confession in wood. At the time, I had thought he was being poetic, speaking of the labor, the love, the life we had built. Now I knew better. I waited until the digital clock on the oven read 2:15 a.m. The world was asleep. I went to Richard's old workshop in the basement. It was just as he had left it, a sanctuary of sawdust and steel. The scent of cedar and oil still clung to the air. On the wall, his wood-carving tools hung in a neat leather roll, their polished rosewood handles gleaming in the dim light. I took the roll, my hand surprisingly steady. The familiar weight of it was a comfort and a curse. These were the tools that had created the beauty of our home. Tonight, I would use them to reveal its ugliness. Back upstairs, I knelt before the fireplace. It was Richard's masterpiece, carved from a single massive piece of oak. It was a riot of intertwining leaves, vines, and hidden faces. It had taken him almost a year. People always marveled at it. They saw artistry, craftsmanship. I now saw a monument to a lie. My fingers, guided by a memory I didn't know I had, traced the lines of one of the largest, most ornate scrolled leaves on the right side of the mantel. There, a seam, so fine it was almost invisible, a perfect disruption in the grain that no one but the carver would ever notice. I selected a thin, sharp blade from the roll. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. What if I was wrong? What if this was just a delusion, a product of my addled mind, and I was about to vandalize my husband's greatest work for nothing? But the memory of his voice was too clear. A confession in wood. I slid the tip of the blade into the seam. It was a perfect fit. With slow, careful pressure, I pried. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint groan of old wood, the carved leaf moved. It wasn't a drawer. It was a lid, swinging open on a tiny, hidden hinge. Inside was a small, hollowed-out cavity, no bigger than my fist. It was dark, lined with faded black velvet. It didn't hold a deed or a confession written on paper. It held 2 things. The first was small, cold, and metallic. I lifted it into the dim light from the hallway. It was a cigar cutter. Sterling silver, tarnished with age, but still elegant. And on its polished surface, engraved in a flourishing script, were 2 initials. O.V. My breath caught in my throat. Oliver Vance. 40 years ago, the newspapers had been full of his disappearance. A flamboyant, ruthless real estate developer, a rival who had nearly destroyed us before he vanished without a trace. The articles had mentioned his affectations, his custom-tailored suits, his love for expensive Cuban cigars, and his ever-present silver cutter. And here it was, in my fireplace, in my home. But that wasn't all. Tucked behind where the cutter had been, there was something else. A small glass vial, the kind used for scientific specimens, sealed with a cork and wax. Inside, suspended in a clear, viscous liquid, was a single sliver of wood, and wrapped around the outside of the vial, held by a brittle piece of string, was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper. Richard's handwriting, small and precise as an architect's drawing, was unmistakable. The floorboards beneath the hearth. A different kind of wood. Ash, not oak. He is our foundation. I read the words again, and again. He is our foundation. My God. My God. A wave of nausea washed over me, so strong I had to brace myself against the mantel. I looked down at the wide oak planks of the living room floor, and then at the slate hearthstone that sat before the fireplace. A different kind of wood. Ash. Underneath the stone, under the floor, Richard had replaced a section of the oak subflooring with ash, a marker, a tombstone hidden in plain sight. Oliver Vance wasn't just a ghost in the memory of the house. He was in its very bones. The startup capital we had used to launch our business, the money that appeared in our account just weeks after he vanished, the money that had funded this house, Liam's education, Emma's designer clothes, the entire gilded life they were so desperate to protect. It was his. We had built our empire on a foundation of ash wood and rotting bone. The fatigue I had felt for months was gone, burned away by a truth so monstrous it was incandescent. The fight tomorrow wasn't about a conservatorship. It wasn't about my autonomy. It was about an ancient crime that had finally, after 40 years, risen to the surface. I carefully placed the cigar cutter and the vial back into the hidden compartment and clicked the leaf shut. The secret was safe again, for a few more hours. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the dark, in the house that was a tomb, a silent witness to a confession made of wood and stone and sin. I was no longer a victim. I was the keeper of the reckoning. The morning arrived, pale and gray. I dressed with purpose, not in the soft cardigans of a frail old woman, but in a tailored black dress and the simple pearl necklace Richard had given me on our 25th anniversary. The pearls felt cold against my skin. I stood before the mirror and saw not a victim, but a matriarch, a queen on the verge of torching her own kingdom. Harper arrived first, a calming presence in a charcoal gray suit. She gave me a single sharp nod. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded back. No more words were needed. We sat on the sofa, the fireplace to our right, a silent, monolithic witness. At precisely 10 o'clock they arrived. Liam, Emma, and a man who could only be their lawyer. He was young, slick, with a bespoke suit and an air of effortless entitlement. He radiated the same energy as the lawyers in the online ads. He introduced himself as Mr. Davies. "Mrs. Miller," Davies began, his voice smooth as oil. "Thank you for agreeing to this. We all believe a quiet resolution is in everyone's best interest." Liam arranged his face into a mask of filial concern. "Mom, we're just worried about you. That's all this is." Emma sat beside him, her hands folded primly in her lap. She looked at me, her eyes full of a cloying, counterfeit sympathy. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Mia, that you're safe." They took the armchairs opposite us, forming a neat little line of attack. The performance began. Mr. Davies led, outlining their concerns. He used words like erratic, vulnerable, fiduciary responsibility. Then it was Liam's turn. "Mom, we love you," he started, his voice dripping with false sincerity. He recounted the incident with the beach house, painting it as a sign of my dangerous impulsiveness. "And there have been other things. You seem so confused lately, so frail, forgetting conversations we just had, getting lost in your own thoughts."
It's breaking my heart to see you this way. He was a good actor. I had to give him that. Years of practice, I supposed. Then Emma chimed in, her voice soft and gentle. I've been trying my best to help. Dropping by, making sure she's eating properly. I even bring her a special tea every night I visit, to help her calm her nerves and get some rest. She gets so agitated sometimes. She glanced at me, a perfect portrait of a long-suffering, devoted daughter-in-law. This was it. The cue. The moment the trap was sprung. I let the silence hang in the air for a beat, letting her lie settle over the room. Then I looked directly at my son. My voice, when it came, was not the thin, reedy voice of a confused old woman. It was clear, cold, and carried the weight of the stone hearth beside me. You're right, Liam, I said. The surprise on their faces was immediate. They had expected arguments, tears, denial, not agreement. I have been feeling unwell, I continued, my gaze shifting to Emma, pinning her in place. Confused, foggy, especially after drinking the special tea your wife so lovingly prepares for me each night. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The color drained from Emma's face, leaving a blotchy, panicked pallor. Her primly folded hands flew apart. Liam stared, his mouth half open, the script forgotten. Mr. Davies's smooth facade cracked, a flicker of professional alarm in his eyes. Before he could recover, before he could bluster and object, Harper leaned forward and placed a tablet on the coffee table between us. She swiped the screen, and a series of colored graphs appeared. We have reason to believe, Harper stated, her voice cool and devoid of emotion, that Mrs. Miller has been the victim of systematic poisoning, timed to coincide with this conservatorship hearing. She tapped the screen. This data is from the health monitor Mrs. Miller wears. It shows a consistent, alarming pattern. On the evenings you visit Emma and administer your calming tea, Mia's blood oxygen levels plummet into a state of hypoxia. Her heart rate becomes dangerously irregular. These symptoms, fatigue, confusion, memory loss, are not the result of age. They are the direct result of being drugged. Davies finally found his voice. This is preposterous, an outrageous, unsubstantiated accusation. You have no proof. Oh, but we do, Harper said calmly, not taking her eyes off Emma. We have date and time-stamped biometric data correlated with date and time-stamped social media posts and text messages where you, Emma, proudly announce you are on your way to care for your ailing mother-in-law. It's a very neat, very damning timeline. Liam shot to his feet. This is insane. Mom, what is she talking about? Are you behind this? Are you trying to set us up? His face was a mask of rage and disbelief. He was still playing his part, but the stage beneath his feet was collapsing. I looked at him, my son, this stranger with his father's eyes and a heart full of greed. The pity I might have felt was gone, scoured away by the poison and the lies. I wasn't finished. The tea was just the overture. The real opera was about to begin. I let my gaze drift from his face to the massive oak mantelpiece, to the cold stone of the hearth. The tea, I said, my voice low and resonant in the suddenly silent room, is the least of the poisons in this house. The data from the watch lay on the coffee table between us, a stark, digital tombstone for a family that was already dead. Emma's face was a crumbling mask of disbelief. Liam's was a thundercloud of rage. His lawyer, a man named Peterson, whose suit probably cost more than my first car, was already puffing up his chest to object. He opened his mouth, a fountain of indignant legal jargon ready to spray across the room. But my voice cut through the air before he could begin, quiet and cold and heavy as a block of granite. But my poor health, my supposed cognitive decline, that isn't the most interesting secret in this house. Every eye snapped to me. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air from the room. I felt Harper's gaze on me, steady, a silent anchor in the storm I was about to unleash. I pushed myself up from my armchair, my bones protesting with a familiar ache, but my resolve was a steel rod in my spine. I walked, step by deliberate step, to the fireplace. The grand, ornate carving of oak and mahogany that Richard had poured his soul into. His confessional, my prison, my fingers,
thin and spotted with age, closed around the heavy silver cigar cutter I'd placed on the mantel. It felt cold against my skin, a relic from a ghost. I turned, holding it up so the light caught the tarnished gleam of the metal, the small, elegant initials engraved on its surface. O.V. "You covet this house," I said, my voice even, almost conversational. I looked directly at Liam, then at Emma. "This wealth, this life, you feel entitled to it, a birthright, but in all your years of taking, of assuming, of accepting, you've never once asked where it truly came from." Liam scoffed, a raw, ugly sound. "What are you talking about now? Dad was a genius. He built the company from nothing. We know the story." "You know the story we told you," I corrected softly. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, then another. I watched the confusion war with the anger on my son's face. "You're right about one thing. Your father was a genius, a master craftsman, but a businessman? No. Richard was an artist who worked with wood. He didn't have the killer instinct." I paused, letting the words land. I did. I told them everything. I told them about the world 40 years ago. A world before the easy money and the established name. A world of struggle, of debt, of lying awake at night listening to the rain and the sound of your own heart hammering with fear. I told them about Oliver Vance. He wasn't just a business rival. He was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who collected companies like trophies and left their founders destitute. He had us in a corner. A bad investment, a contract with predatory clauses he'd exploited. He was days away from ruining us. Not just the business. Everything. He was going to take our home, the one we had before this one, and leave us with nothing. "He came to the house," I said, my voice dropping lower, pulling them into the memory. It was a Thursday. The rain was relentless, biblical. He sat in Richard's workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and varnish, and he smiled. He laid out the terms of our surrender. He was enjoying it. He wanted to see us break. Emma was shaking her head, a little frantic motion. "This is insane. This is a story. You're trying to distract from what we're here to discuss." I ignored her. My focus was on Liam. He was my son. He carried Richard's blood. He needed to hear it from me. "Your father. Richard was a gentle man, a good man. He wanted to reason with him, to appeal to some sense of decency Oliver didn't possess." But I saw the look in Oliver's eyes, the pleasure. He wasn't just going to take the business. He was going to salt the earth so nothing would ever grow again. For us. For you. You were just a boy, Liam. You had your whole future ahead of you. I looked down at the cigar cutter in my hand. Oliver liked expensive things, Cuban cigars, silver accessories. He took this out, clipped his cigar, and blew smoke in your father's face. And in that moment, I knew. There was no negotiation. There was only survival. The room was so still I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. "That night," I continued, my voice a near whisper, "after he left, Richard and I didn't speak for an hour. We just sat there, in the silence, listening to the storm. Then I looked at him and I said, 'He can't be allowed to do this.' And your father, my gentle, good Richard, looked back at me and he nodded. He understood. It was a choice. Their future or our future. His life or yours." Liam's face was ashen. "No," he breathed. "No, you didn't." "We called him back," I said, the words falling like ice chips. "We told him we'd found a way to get the initial payment he demanded. A lie. We told him to come back to the construction site, this site, where this house now stands. The foundation was just a hole in the ground then, a muddy pit filled with rainwater. He came alone. He was arrogant. He thought he'd won." I walked back from the fireplace and stood in the center of the room, the pivot point around which their world was about to shatter. He stepped out of his car, into the rain and the mud, and Richard hit him, just once, with a piece of scaffolding timber. It was quick. There was no struggle. Just a sound, a terrible final sound, and then silence, except for the rain washing everything clean. Emma made a gagging noise, her hand flying to her mouth. Her carefully constructed facade of poised elegance had dissolved into raw, primitive horror. "We buried him," I said, gesturing with my free hand to the floor beneath their feet. "Right there, under the hearth, before the foundation was even poured. We wrapped him in tarpaulin and laid him in the earth. Your father built this fireplace directly on top of him. He called it his confessional, a monument of guilt and protection, carved in wood." I let that sink in. I watched the comprehension dawn, the slow, sickening realization that was more devastating than any legal argument. "But Oliver Vance was a wealthy man," I said, my voice hardening. "And wealthy men are often careless. He had a briefcase with him, full of documents, yes, but also cash. A lot of it. For a man who liked to operate on the edges of the law, untraceable money was a tool of the trade." My eyes locked onto Liam's. "That briefcase, Liam, that was the seed capital for the family business. His money. His stolen, blood-soaked money. That's what paid for your first private school tuition. That's what funded the expansion that made us respectable. Every European vacation you posted on Instagram, every designer handbag Emma flaunted at the country club, every brick in this house you feel so entitled to. It was all bought and paid for by the man buried under your feet." Liam stared at me, his mouth agape, his face a grotesque mask of horror. He looked down at the polished oak floorboards as if they were about to open up and swallow him whole. Emma finally scrambled up from the sofa and stumbled toward the bathroom, her hand clamped over her mouth, her body convulsing. The sound of violent retching echoed through the hall. Peterson, the lawyer, was frozen, his mouth slightly open, his legal pads forgotten on his lap. He looked from me to Liam, to the empty space where Emma had been. He was a man paid to control narratives, and I had just detonated a bomb that vaporized any story he could ever hope to spin. "This house isn't a home," I said, the final words delivered into the ringing silence. "It's a mausoleum. Your entire life is a lie, built on the bones of a dead man. And I have just opened the crypt." The aftermath was a quiet apocalypse. The sound of Emma's sickness eventually faded, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like the end of the world. Liam hadn't moved. He was a statue of a man, broken from the inside out. Peterson, the lawyer, slowly, mechanically, began to pack his briefcase, his eyes avoiding mine, avoiding everyone's. He was a creature of a world with rules and procedures, and he had just fallen through a hole into a place where none of that mattered. Harper, ever calm, took out her phone. Her movements were precise, economical. She didn't look at me for permission. She didn't need to. This was the endgame we had planned for, even if its final form was more terrible than either of us had imagined. Her voice was level as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, operator. I need to report a crime at 14 Seabrook Lane. Yes, a homicide. The victim's name is Oliver Vance. He's been missing for approximately 40 years. There was a pause. I could imagine the confusion on the other end of the line. Harper continued, unflappable. "The perpetrator is here. She is my client. And the body is in the house." Time seemed to warp after that call. It stretched and compressed. Liam finally moved, stumbling out of the room without a word, his face vacant. Peterson scurried out behind him, a man fleeing a haunted house. I sat alone in the living room with Harper, the cigar cutter still on the coffee table, a silver exclamation point to the day's confession. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Later that day, the quiet hum of official vehicles filled the long driveway. The police arrived first, 2 detectives, a man and a woman, their faces professionally blank, but their eyes filled with a cautious curiosity. They spoke to Harper, then to me. My voice was thin, tired, but steady. I told them the same story I told Liam, this time without the emotion, just the cold, hard facts. A confession, 40 years late. Then the forensic team came. They were a flock of ghosts in white Tyvek suits, moving with a quiet, methodical reverence that felt strangely appropriate for disturbing a grave. They brought in equipment, set up lights. They laid down protective sheeting over the Persian rug, and then they began the careful, painstaking work of removing the hearthstones. I watched from my armchair, a ghost myself. I saw Richard's hands in every stone they lifted. I remembered him setting them, his brow furrowed in concentration, his strong, calloused fingers working the mortar. He was building a cage for our secret, a beautiful cage of stone and wood to hold the ugliness inside. The air filled with the scent of old stone and disturbed earth. Underneath the hearth, they found the floorboards. Most were oak, just like the rest of the room. But one section, directly in the center, was different. It was ash. The marker only Richard and I understood. When they pried up those ash boards, the room fell silent. They found what was left of Oliver Vance, right where Richard had laid him. The story exploded. It didn't just leak, it detonated. It was far too strange, too gothic, too shocking to be contained. Seabrook matriarch confesses to 40-year-old murder, heiress accused of poisoning mother for blood money inheritance. The headlines were a lurid storm. It was on every national news channel, every website. My face, a recent photo taken from a charity gala, was plastered next to a grainy, black-and-white image of Oliver Vance from 1984. The internet, of course, went feral. The story became a viral sensation on TikTok and Twitter. People became armchair detectives, creating threads, podcasts, and video essays. They dug up Liam and Emma's social media accounts, which they had foolishly left public. Every post was dissected. Every picture became a piece of evidence in the court of public opinion. Their perfect life, so carefully curated, was now a digital museum of hypocrisy. A picture of Emma at a charity auction was captioned, "Wonder if she's bidding with murder money." A family photo of them on a yacht in Greece was hashtagged #Mausoleum Marine. They were a meme, a cautionary tale, a national scandal. Liam and Emma were destroyed, not by a court of law, but by the sheer, annihilating weight of the truth. Their friends vanished. Their business partners invoked morality clauses. They were social pariahs, their names synonymous with a uniquely American tragedy of greed and secrets. Their lives were not just ruined, they were hollowed out, leaving nothing but a shell of shame. I was questioned, of course, several times. I sat in a sterile interview room at the station, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hands. The detectives were not unkind. They were simply trying to piece together a puzzle 40 years old. Harper was always by my side, a formidable shield of legal expertise. She presented the data from the smartwatch, the lab results from the herbal tea, the sworn testimony from Scarlett. She framed the narrative, a woman systematically weakened and gaslighted by her own family, pushed to the brink, finally unburdening herself of a secret she had carried as a life sentence. In the end, I was never charged. The combination of factors was too strange, too complex for a simple prosecution. My age. My documented, medically induced cognitive and physical decline, the 40 years that had passed, the absolute lack of any other evidence beyond my own confession and the bones in the floor. My punishment, the district attorney argued in a press conference, was the life I had lived. My sentence was the secret I had carried every single day for 4 decades. I had already served my time. I sold the house. The transaction was quick, handled by Harper's office. A developer bought it for the land, eager to tear down the house of horrors and build something new and sanitary. The money, a substantial sum even after fees, was deposited into an account I held for less than a day. Every last cent of the blood money was donated, anonymously, to a national charity that provided support and resources for the families of missing persons. It was the only restitution I could offer Oliver Vance. I couldn't give him back his life, but maybe his death could help someone else find their way home. I couldn't keep it. It was never truly mine. I now live here, in a small, quiet apartment overlooking the ocean. It's not far from the plot of land where the Seabrook house once stood, but it feels like a different universe. There are no grand foyers, no hand-carved mantels, no ghosts in the floorboards. There is just a clean, bright space with a large window that frames the endless blue of the sea. The salt spray mists the glass, and the sound of the waves is a constant, soothing rhythm. It's the sound of cleansing, I never spoke to Liam or Emma again. There were no angry phone calls, no letters of recrimination, just a vast, bottomless silence. Their existence has become abstract to me, a half-remembered story about two people I used to know. They are adrift in the wreckage of the life they so desperately coveted, and I feel nothing but a profound and final emptiness where a mother's love used to be. Scarlett writes me letters, old-fashioned pen on heavy, cream-colored paper. She is finishing her nursing degree, she tells me. She got top marks in her pharmacology class. Her letters are careful, measured. She doesn't offer easy forgiveness or cheap absolution. She doesn't excuse what I did, what Richard did. But in her neat, precise handwriting, I can read a struggle for empathy. "I've been thinking about the cage you were in, Grandma," she wrote in her last letter. "I think I understand it, but I can't forget the price of the key." She understands the prison I was in. And for now, that is more than enough. I have lost everything. My husband, my son, my family, my home. The past I thought I knew. It was all stripped away, burned down to the foundations. But as I sit here now, in this small, quiet room, watching the tide roll in and then pull back out to sea, I feel a sense of peace I have not known since I was a young woman, before Oliver Vance, before the rain and the mud and the secret. The rage is gone. The fear is gone. The suffocating weight of the secret that defined my entire adult life is gone. The gilded cage has been dismantled. I am no longer a relic to be managed, a problem to be solved, or a secret to be kept. My story has been told. It was a brutal, ugly path, but it led me here. To this quiet room, this view of the sea, this freedom. My name is Mia, and this is my story. The secrets we keep can become our prisons. Sometimes the walls are built of fear, and other times they're built of stone and lies. What secret would you break free from if you had the chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone fighting a silent battle, someone trapped in a cage others can't see, share this story with them. Sometimes, just knowing you're not alone is the first step toward finding the key.